Hey friends, Freedom Voice here. It's Sunday, September 14th, 2025. I want to go ahead and do a video on the Charlie Kirk assassination. I'm going to begin reading here in Acts 20:29 to 30. It says, "For this I know that after my departure shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing the flock. Also of your own selves shall men arise, speaking perverse things to draw away disciples after themselves," or after them. In verse 32, it says, "And now, brethren, I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up, to give you an inheritance among them which are sanctified." All right. This is the purpose of the scriptures. The scriptures were given so that we can, number one, be built up to be sanctified, but also, number two, so that we can have the spiritual discernment to discern between truth and error, right and wrong, good and evil. Some very interesting anomalies that I thought were quite fascinating is worth mentioning and bringing to view here on this video. Specifically in the speech that was given by his wife 2 days after his assassination, and then also the viewing when his wife viewed the body there in the casket, or the quote-unquote body. I'll be honest, friends, I'm very, very partial to what I see and hear in the media. I don't believe a lot of it is true. And so for that reason, you're going to hear me talk with this skepticism that's very obvious. You can look at his wife here and you can see her in the casket, or sort of looking down in the casket at what appears to be her husband, which to me only looks like a mannequin, or at best, sort of a replica of a body, because you can see the pigmentation of the skin just seems to be very different than hers. Now, it's only 2 days after the shooting, so I don't think that the embalming and his body setting up in the morgue would cause that type of decolorization in the skin. And so for that reason, it raised red flags to me immediately. Secondly, you'll notice the ring on her finger. I know others have talked about this. What does the G represent? Does it represent God? Does it represent Gucci? What does it represent? I personally believe that it represents, among other things, Freemasonry. That both Charlie Kirk and his wife, Erica Kirk, were members of the Order of the Eastern Star, or the Freemason fraternity. Now, just to solidify these points, friends, I want to show you several pictures of Erica, his wife, and the ring on her finger. You can see her here giving a speech at Turning Point USA. Again, this is at another time and date, but you can see that G on the ring. I believe that G represents Freemasonry. But I find it interesting that they were careful to show that G over the hand of what appeared to be Charlie Kirk in the casket. You can see that G. I mean, everyone sees it. And you've ever been a part of any secret society, which I don't encourage you to be a part of it, because it is anti-Christ. It is anti-Christian. However, if you've ever been a part of any secret society, you know that oftentimes they communicate through signs and symbols. That is the way they communicate with each other. That is the way they make statements. And this is no different, friends. Now, again, I want to show you that ring on another occasion here at Turning Point USA when Erica was giving a speech. You can see the very obvious ring on the finger there with the G. And again, my question is just, what does the G represent? I'm sure that there is some meaning behind it, but what does it represent? But the other thing that I want to touch on is the speech that she gave 2 days after the assassination of her husband. It's very obvious in the speech, two things. Number one, Erica seems to grieve very different than many. I know if I would have lost a loved one, especially a spouse, 2 days after, I would not be up giving a speech and smiling. But Maybe perhaps that's her way of coping. Maybe she's able to do that. But the other thing that I noticed is that, as I've mentioned in other videos, it's very, very obvious that she's reading from a script. Everything seems to be read from a script. Now, again, I realize that you're giving a speech and everyone's watching. You want to make sure you watch your words and so on and so forth. But I just find it very interesting how not only do they read from the script, but everything just seems so mechanical. It seems like there's a great deal of a lack of emotion, especially after a loved one such as a spouse is shot and killed, the way Charlie Kirk was. Going back to the scriptures, it says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 and 16, notice the words of Jesus. It says, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits." Now, Jesus is saying, beware of false prophets, because they're going to come to you in sheep's clothing. In other words, they're going to come to you pretending as though they're Christians. They're going to come to you and say all the right things, even talk about the Sabbath and say that the Sabbath is the seventh day, Saturday, and it should be kept. But Jesus says inwardly, they're ravening wolves. You know what a ravening wolf is? It's a predatory animal. It's an animal that seeks to kill in order to survive. And that is what modern Christians, many modern Christians who are not led by the Spirit of Christ, that is what they'll set out to do. I want to play a video here of Charlie Kirk actually talking about the Sabbath. And you'll notice as you listen to him, it seems that everything he's saying is just so truth-filled and so right.
The Sabbath we should find rest in the Sabbath, and on the seventh day God rested and saw that it was good. But we know that our ultimate rest is in Christ Jesus. Mm-hmm. Secondly, though, and I think this is important, I don't want to get too deep into this. I'm not a theologian. My new friend here can answer this far better than I can. But there, I think, is some sloppy and misleading Christian teaching at times that says that Jesus does not want you to honor the Sabbath and Jesus broke the Sabbath. I'm not going to get too far deep into that. I'll allow my new friend to comment on that.
One of the very obvious gifts that Charlie Kirk possesses is the ability to be able, he's very charismatic, the ability to be able to speak convincingly. And that is what he's doing here. He talks like a pastor. He talks like a preacher. But remember, Jesus says, beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing. Inwardly, they're ravening wolves. You'll notice here this video of Charlie Kirk as he's speaking. I couldn't help but to notice that ring on his finger. Could that ring also be a type of a Freemasonry symbol? Could Charlie Kirk actually have been a Freemason? I believe he was. I believe that he was an agent. I believe he was a shield. I believe he worked directly for the CIA and the FBI. And I believe that this whole thing was a setup in order to further the agenda of the global elite to restrict freedom here in America. That is the reason why you can see Charlie Kirk speaking to Christians, sounding like a Christian, but then he turns around and he speaks to woke students at a university and he's able to sound like them. Other times he speaks with a very racist tone. And I want to go ahead and play some of those videos just so that you can kind of get an understanding of how it seems as though he has this Jekyll Hyde type personality in his speaking. It's very confusing.
I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. Because of DEI, it begs the question when you see a black pilot, you wonder, you say, I hope they are qualified. I wouldn't think that if the CEO of United or these airlines would reject DEI and say excellence is the ultimate standard. Is if I'm dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic black woman, I wonder, is she there because of her excellence, or is she there because of affirmative action? It almost creates thought patterns that are not necessarily wholesome. It creates resentment, doesn't it, Heather? No one really cares when it's HR managers. No one cared when it was, just kind of paper shufflers or even engineers. But now when it's like, wait, hold on a second. You're going to remove my appendix and you're a black lesbian.
So it like hurts my heart because doing what I love has been kind of taken away from me to please other people. Yeah, that's the point, Simone Biles. You're representing your nation, you're selfish sociopath. You kidding me? We are raising a generation of weak people like Simone Biles. Again, if you want to be, if she got all these mental health problems, don't show up. She's an incredible athlete. Of course she's an incredible athlete. I just said she's probably the greatest gymnast of all time. She's also very selfish. She's immature, and she is a shame to the country. She's totally a sociopath. Of course she's a sociopath. Andrew said she's not a sociopath. What kind of person skips the gold medal match? Who does that? It's a shame to the nation.
LeBron James is a self-interested, narcissistic, and we know he's not very smart. He does these press conferences where he thinks he's making sense spiritually and freedom of speech. But he's a product of his time. What would you expect from LeBron James? It's cool to insult America. It's cool to sell yourself out to China. Not very bright, not wise, not somebody of good character, but as a blowhard. He'll never have to apologize. He'll never have to admit failure. And of course, everyone knows that LeBron James chronically cheats on his wife. Obviously, he's an NBA player. Savannah James should be asked about that. Hey, how do you feel about your husband cheating on you all the time? But that's just how the NBA works. The whole thing is an open marriage. He's immoral in almost everything he does. He shouldn't be lifted up, but I don't think most Americans do.
Now, I don't follow a lot of the people that he's referring to, like LeBron James and things of that nature, but the way he talks, the way he communicates, especially in this segment, it doesn't really sound like a Christian. He doesn't really sound like someone who is caring and loving like he's made out to be. He sounds more like a racist, and I have to be very honest. This is not the only time he's talked about black people in particular, and not the very indicting things that he said about specifically DEI and black people in general. He's said it before about people historically, like Martin Luther King.
And we said some things today, and we challenged some of the primary doctrine that is running modernity. If you disagree with our take on MLK, just listen to this episode. Give it a fair hearing. Just say, hey, maybe I don't agree with Charlie. Maybe I think he's the best person to live in the 20th century and that he's worthy of worship, which is effectively what this society demands. Then fine, just listen to the episode and maybe you'll learn something.
We talk about the positives. And then we also get into some of the other implications of this. We're a truth-seeking show. But I can say declaratively, this guy is not worthy of a national holiday. He is not worthy of godlike status. In fact, I think it's really... Black America was getting richer, they were getting stronger, and families were largely still put together before the Great Society, Voting Rights Act, and Civil Rights Act. 60 years later, Black America is in a worse position. I'm not saying it's because of the Civil Rights Act. I'm not saying it's because of the Voting Rights Act, but somewhere something went awry. Kind of going off your speech, I could have done the old conservative thing. I could have hit in the corner, said, you know what, I'm so sorry, how dare I? Because I saw the chatter increasing. I saw the right-wing intelligentsia saying, no, Charlie, it's a career ender. You don't do this. You just say MLK was awesome, and you don't ask questions, and you just kind of walk away. I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. I think that kind of attitude is destructive and wrong, and we felt the pressure that day. We were getting text messages of people saying, Charlie, this is going to end your career. Charlie, you'll never be back in decent circles. And I said, you know what, honestly, I don't subscribe to that. I'm going to trust the Lord. I know what we're saying is true. I was disappointed because I said, listen, guys, you could hate what I'm doing. You could criticize it. But if you're just going to throw the R word around like a Frisbee because I dare to question somebody who I consider to be a false idol of the modern cult of anti-racism.
See, friends, I think it's very clear that Charlie Kirk has a way of sort of bending his views to suit the audience that he's speaking to. He can sound very Christian and very God-fearing in one circle. Then he can sound very woke, very liberal in another circle. Then he can also get to the point to where he sounds really racist. And this is the reason why I believe that Charlie Kirk is nothing but a shield, an agent of the CIA, specifically hired to spin the narrative in different circles. He can sound very Christian and get into the Christian circles and spin the narrative. He can sound very woke and liberal and get into universities and spin the narrative for young people. Basically, this is the tactic of Albert Pike. The tactic of the Freemason fraternity is order out of chaos, to actually produce or to incite confusion in such a way where you would call for order because of the chaos. And I believe Charlie Kirk was specifically designed and put in place, and he was sort of raised up for such a time as this by the Freemasons in order to create this type of confusion in our society. So in essence, what I'm saying is, I believe Charlie Kirk's quote-unquote assassination was nothing but a psyop. It's a psyop designed, number one, to distract, but number two, order out of chaos. The doctrine of the Freemasons, specifically the doctrine of Albert Pike. And I believe that Charlie Kirk was specifically planted in different circles within society in order to bring about this chaos so that a new world order could become a reality. All right, guys, I think that's going to do it for me in this video. I am going to do a part 2. And in part 2, I want to talk about the specific anomalies surrounding the quote-unquote assassination. Not only that, I want to talk about who was the alleged shooter. The alleged shooter that the FBI pointed out, this gentleman right here. And I want to show some very interesting, even mind-blowing details surrounding the shooter and why I believe that this shooter was also a plant by the local establishment to help bring about this order out of chaos. Until next time, take care.